The digital art era is here. AI and art creation tools empower anyone to make it. Blockchain technologies allow anyone to own it. VR, AR, and extended reality immerse us in it. Let's talk to artists and innovators behind the visual magic. I'm your host, Roger Dickerman. Welcome to the future of art. Today, we welcome in our first two-guest episode. On one mic, we have Durk Vandermeer, aka Durk at Work. He's the art director of Artifex. He's the art director of Aku. He's a virtual world builder and 3D model creator. On the other mic, we have Justin Wetch. Justin is the art interaction director at Artifex, creator of immersive art experiences, and he's an Alaskan artist with a wide-ranging skill set. This is a special one for two reasons. One, it's a chance to shine the spotlight on two people I spend an awful lot of time with at Artifex, and they shape some of my own vision for the future of what art is and what dimensionality means, or as we like to call it, Web 3D. Two, while we all knew something special would be happening at approximately this time, we did not know it would happen on the day of the recording. Let's get to it. Durk Vandermeer, Justin Wetch, welcome to the future of art.
Thanks.
Great to be here. Thank you.
I don't know what form this is going to take. We spend an absurd amount of time together, have the honor and privilege of doing that. I think this is going to be half interview and half collaborative team meeting of some sort.
It's an interesting role change for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great to be on the best podcast in the Web3 space for sure.
Oh,
Just
man.
gonna come out the gate and say that.
Singing to my heart, man. Singing to my heart. I'm just excited to have fun. Listen, I mean, we do get to literally work together on Artifex, and that is always and has never not been amazing. But I am also a big believer in each of your own artist careers. I'm privileged enough to own, to have collected an artwork of each of yours. And yeah, I want to talk about some of that stuff as well. So I think we're gonna have a wide-ranging dialogue here. Let's get to it. Let's talk a lot about art, a lot about dimensionality, and a lot about you guys. And so I want to go one at a time. Got to pose the toughest question first. Let's go to Durk first. So Durk Vandermeer, or Durk at Work, because we should lead with that. Durk at Work, how do you define art?
So for me, art is whatever somebody says is art. If somebody does whatever and says this is art, then that's art. There are people that look at a painting that's just completely red with just a single yellow dot on it, and they're like, that's not art. You know, but what they mean is, I don't like that art. Because in their world, there would be no bad paintings, you know, if you look at it like that. So I think art can literally be anything. It's the biggest, widest definition possible.
Justin Wetch, what does art mean to you?
Well, to me, I think art is sort of what makes life worth living. At least to me, I feel like it's sort of the glue that binds together all of the strange, diverse human experiences that we have. Living life, love, things happening, you know, being able to express your unique experience as a human being on this planet in some way. I think anything that strives to accomplish that is art to me.
I'm going to throw a very broad topic on the table and go with it where you'd like. And that topic is 3D and dimensionality. Because in some ways, that's the topic that has binded us all together. And that's the topic that you've each chosen in various ways to walk your art forward through the lens of 3D and dimensionality, whether it be through creative tools, literal models and AR filters, what have you. Let's talk about 3D. And Durk, just to go back to you, why did 3D specifically speak to you as a path for your art?
I mean, at first, it was just painting and drawing, and I really preferred that. But I think when I was young, you're at a stage you try everything. So photography, film, and 3D, like very early stages. I mean, I was just creating yellow spheres and blue cubes and having them rotate around each other and be like, wow, this is super cool. fucking around with it. And I think really 10 years later, I get out of art school. I'm like, how am I going to make money? The computer art, that was kind of the way to make money. So it was kind of an economic choice, just a practical choice, because I still love to paint and draw. But from that came like a really deepening of what you can do with the tools, what set it apart from traditional tools, and really fell in love with everything that came with it. So also like virtual reality, and I think those tools kind of helped me realize that although I started as a painter, like I was kind of more of a sculptor, but impatient one. So like I couldn't do it on a real rock, but in the virtual space, I can make sculptures. So yeah.
And really, Dirk, just to stay on you for one more beat here, I realized this recently. I don't know if I've ever said it as explicitly to you, but I realized recently in talking to Coldy how much of a strong influence you specifically have been on me. The original Artifex fever dream of wanting to pull an object out and make it 3D and have that 3D go everywhere, and then ultimately Justin connecting those dots in Unreal Engine and immersive game environments. All of that in some ways traces back, or at least one of the absolute core seeds to that for me was seeing the artist Coldy, a dear friend of all of ours, take Shaman 2, an artwork of yours, and put it in AR across I believe it was over a balcony or something along those lines. And social on Twitter, as it was called back in the day, but social on Twitter was quite small relative to the crypto art space. And that captivated my attention. And 3D was not really being talked about all that much. Not as much as it is now, and not as much as it's destined to be talked about. But that use case really jumped out. And I was having this conversation recently and realized how formative that was for my own mind and for my own journey. So thank you for that. And how did it feel to you to see your artwork, Shaman 2, I believe this was the end of 2020, be taken out there by Coldy and used in that way?
Yeah, I have to think back. Sometimes it's hard to remember because there's so much has happened in this space in such a short amount of time. But the piece was part of this AR app where they actually had these geolocations where you would actually put the artwork. So I believe that was the project, and then kind of I think, and that's just interesting hearing you talk about this in this way, because I do think that one of the powers of AR is just the visual of like the real world in contrast with that 3D sculpture. That does communicate some, maybe it goes too far to like call it skeuomorphism or something, but it does just feel more real, and people can kind of understand digital art in a pretty good way, seeing some AR or video or footage. So it's interesting hearing you say that kind of clicked at that point for you.
Justin, let's go over to you. How does 3D play a role in your art, in your creative process?
3D to me, well, I think the reason it speaks to me so much, and kind of the reason I first started being interested in it, was because filmmaking to me was kind of the first art form that I fell in love with the idea of being involved in. And a lot of the most inspiring things when I'd like watch videos behind the scenes, YouTube or whatever, about filmmaking process involved like visual effects and things like that. And I was just so curious about like how they managed to pull off these like incredible visuals and things. And so that kind of led me down the rabbit hole of like, how can I start making things like that? And then once you start delving into 3D, especially as someone who, like Durk was saying, for himself, like enjoying a lot of different art forms, I feel like 3D sort of speaks to me because it combines a lot of the different art forms. Because it's in some ways, whether you're taking more like photographic or graphic design approach, you have your composition, things like that, as if you were painting or taking a picture. And you have, the lighting, and literally, like, when you're making textures, you can paint them on. So, like, any kind of art form that you love as an artist really, like, has a home in the world of 3D, and 3D can be used to augment and dimensionalize it. So that's what I'd say.
At its simplest level, to me at least, yes, scaling and dimensionalizing, like scaling and rotating. And we're going to talk about something special in a moment, but scaling and dimensionalizing, and Durk, you touched on this through the shaman artwork, but being able to place it in your actual environment. Those three things: scaling, dimensionalizing, and placing a digital object in your own environment and context. Those three things at their simplest level are really, really impactful to me.
Yeah, I think, and I think what Justin, to kind of riff on that also, in addition to this, is that you do have many jobs when you're a 3D artist. So you are the painter, you do the textures, you do the lighting, you do the camera. Sometimes you have to know about other jobs because of the stuff you're making. You have to do like a lot of research and stuff. And I think now we're seeing these ways that you can use these AR models become more intricate. Those jobs, that stuff can come back. You can do the lighting on these 3D models yourself. You can shoot videos of them. You can go into a room we've created and do a series of photographs. Still, that's very low. You could call it utility, but the idea is that all of this just is going to grow and grow, and these assets that we're creating are kind of future proof and ready for that. So I think that's what I'm really excited about.
Talk about, and either of you could field this, talk about the gap between present and future. From my perspective, at least, 3D falls in that category of something where we know borderline factually, or at least intuitively, that digital 3D is going to become a bigger and bigger part of what, loosely speaking, our visual landscape, right, over the course of the next 5, 10, 50 years. And yet some of the tools aren't ready. Some of the visuals aren't ready. You can go into all of the various 2D platforms and websites, and some of them don't have proper 3D GLB viewers. Durk, this is something you talk about all the time. A lot of that stuff can get better. And then now we're just at the beginning of, we sort of had the failed Google Glasses era and a lot of things in between. And now we see Apple stepping into the game. And that is very, very promising, but of course will take many iterations to get to even their final product, let alone a universal standard. Talk about the gap between present and future.
I heard this great quote about somebody who said, like, the content of the new medium is always the old medium. Basically, kind of describing the gap you always have to cross before a new medium becomes into like what it's supposed to be. So, for example, like the first movies, people were acting like they were in plays. The scripts were like plays. They were on set locations, like real editing. Not even obviously at first you didn't even have sound. But as movies progressed and editing becomes an art form in itself, and adding scoring a movie and acting, everything gets elevated. It becomes a whole art form at itself. And I think now we are in this stage where we have the content of what we know as art, kind of putting it out there in this new digital form. But time will tell, and it will probably take, 20 years before this medium will tell us what it kind of wants to be. Even all the VR experiences we're seeing, still a lot of them try to mimic the real world. I mean, I've been to so many like metaverse environments that are meant for you to have a group meeting, and they look like a boring place where you would actually have a group meeting. There is, like, instead of like a beautiful diorama, aquarium, whatever. And obviously, there's a reason for that, but like that, the imagination just has to grow. I think a lot of the tools are already there, so we're not really waiting for a lot of tools. We just need to really use our imagination.
Justin, how about you?
I think And I think that's a great way of putting it, Dirk. But for some reason, when you said that last bit about the boring spaces, I'm just imagining a bunch of people like in VR in like a VR cubicle, just like the worst. Like,
Well, I mean, honestly, there is this video game where you are like a truck driver or a bus driver, and it's literally made to be like super boring. So you're just on these long stretches of road, and you have to like hours, and it's all real time. There are people that, for them that's total relaxation for. So I mean, that those kind of experiences will also be there for people. Um, but yeah, I think we can do a lot better.
well, I hope so. I hope so. Well, onto the topic that you were talking about, Roger, about like what stands between the current state of 3D and where it could or should be. I think the biggest factor right now is that the way that people interact with 3D, and for most people, that's not at all. Um, it's not like as intuitive or easy as like interacting with a photo, you know, like until it gets to that point where it's as obvious to people like what that piece of content is and how you interact with it, and it's as easily integrated into like um into the iPhone, for example. Uh, until it gets to that point, I don't think um, it's going to be as effortless as it needs to be for people to interact with it. Although, definitely with the USDZ file format natively on iPhone, it almost feels that way. But I think what does stand between now and a future where 3D is fully appreciated by everyone who, loves all other forms of art, uh, is that very basic sense of like effortless interaction. Because if you think like right now, if you want to interact with a 3D model, that probably involves, you would think like, oh, I have to upload this GLB file to a GLB viewer. You've already lost 90% of the human population with that sentence. Like, and I think what's so powerful about what we're specifically trying to do at Artifex and with this app that we're going to be talking about, uh, is the fact that that's exactly what we're trying to do, is to make it feel like you don't have to know anything about any of the technicals that burden the current paradigm of experiences with 3D. Uh, it just feels as effortless to fully interact with it as if it were a photo or a video or anything, you know, any other completely normal form of content.
It's a really interesting way to frame it. It's almost like, yeah, the closer you can get, you use the photograph analogy. Or I have a Raf Grassetti physical sculpture sitting on my desk here. Right? I could pick that sculpture up, and I know exactly how to hold it. I know approximately the weight that it will carry. I can turn it upside down or look at the back of it. And I don't even have to expend any mental energy to figure out, hey, that's what I want to do right now. And if someone comes into this room, I can say, hey, come check out this physical sculpture, and I know exactly what to do with it, whether I want to pick it up and hand it to them or just point out some intricacies. I think that's a really, really great point. Let me ask this question of both of you. If you rewound about 2 years in the let's just say the Web3 space or the broader digital art space, when a lot of speculation and hype was occurring, you would have heard a huge quote unquote metaverse narrative going on. And the example that was being bandied about, you would hear a lot more Ready Player One future. And I think VR played into like the seeming tip of the spear at the time. A lot of people were looking at it through that type of a lens. We felt a bit of a shift there. Now, I would say most people, not all, but most people are looking at it through the lens of mixed reality or extended reality or whatever the term is you want to throw at it, but more through overlays to your existing visuals, which is the Apple path, it seems. I would love for each of you to talk about that, both the maybe progression in popular thought as well as to what holds the most hope in your brains.
I mean, to kind of riff on what Justin was saying, I do think that currently there is too much friction for VR to go really, really mainstream. That's a technological problem that needs to be solved. So, kind of setting the metaverse up as being that, um, then you're kind of setting yourself up for failure, because I think it's more about what's your definition of the metaverse. If I there are people that include all the time you spend on your mobile phone. You are interacting with a digital world, whether it's fully immersive or less immersive. And I think those levels will always stay there. You sometimes just want a screen. You don't always want a headset. Sometimes you want AR. So I think although those things will exist simultaneously, and we should get to a point where if now you get an image, everybody knows what you can do with it. You can save it. You can set it as your wallpaper, basically. And in the future, it should be very normal for people to receive 3D models, and they should immediately know how to use them, as Justin said. But that just takes time to get kind of in the kind of collective consciousness there, I think. Yeah.
Justin, how about you?
Yeah, I personally am glad to see the shift away from the sort of Ready Player One vision of VR, and towards the sort of extended reality way of thinking about it. Yeah, I think that's part of why, like Apple, for instance, refuses to talk about virtual reality. They'll talk about extended reality or augmented reality, but I think I read it in an internal email from Apple. I think it was like from one of those cases where a bunch of their like internal communications are put out in the world through Discovery. But he was talking about how virtual reality is sort of fundamentally, at least in his view, alienating as an experience, versus augmented reality still fundamentally takes place in this real physical world that we live in, and just does what it says, which is to augment it as opposed to replace it. So whether or not that's true, I don't know, but I do think that the sort of extended reality, whether that's virtual or augmented, is a much better paradigm. And I think also that the way that I think about it is that it's less about like creating a layer of augmented reality over what we already have, um, as it is to just sort of expressing what's already there in a way that can be sort of digested. Like Dirk was saying, with like what is a metaverse, what isn't a metaverse. Like we already have things that people consider to be sort of a metaverse or a quasi metaverse, like Roblox or Fortnite or a lot of classic games. And then, like Dirk was saying, like some people would even consider anything, if it's in the digital world, aren't you already in the metaverse? Um, so from that perspective, I think it's uh, viewing it as a layer of augmentation to what's already there, um, is more about what it's about to me, versus the sort of the virtual. And I'm just kind of happy to see it go in that direction, I guess, over the sort of heavy headset on your face for like 4 hours type of situation.
But I do imagine that also the fact that those are now two different paradigms is also just a technological problem. At some point, it will just be more like a balance or a lever. You can,
Yeah.
like how transparent do you want to get. But I love what you said about using AR to express what's already happening, because I also think that when that user friendly version is there, it's not just the data layer. It's not just telling you, oh, this is the direction you need to go, this is like, but it's also, you're at this party, and now the ceiling is filled with a lot of beautiful, like, light emitting particles that just really add to the party vibe. It's like, there's so much, I think, like mood enhancement you could do in the public space. Again, we need a lot of creativity for that, but really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's what I was kind of trying to say, was that shouldn't be just about, the data, but it's also about these sort of interhuman experiences that happen. And you have just, we all already have, most people have, their digital lives as a significant part of their existence, right? And it's kind of odd if there isn't more of like a bridging between the two worlds. And I think augmented
Right,
reality
right.
and extended reality
Yeah.
is kind of the bridge that might require.
Let's talk philosophically about something, because I was thinking about this, and that we would be getting together outside of the normal team meeting room in a bit of a different context. So that caused me to reflect on all of our journeys together, and crafting artifacts and putting a lot of art and 3D models and collaborative experiences out into the world. And one of the thematic elements of our collective experience here has been not necessarily accepting the current state of affairs, but attempting to push at the boundaries and attempting to grow and give people a bit of a different experience that they've had. And I would say, in the context, at Artifex, it starts with that one-of-one artwork. It becomes the 3D model, right? And then it's about, where does the 3D model go, and how can we give that user an experience that maybe they haven't had. The first way so I want to bring up two things. Let's go in order here. And the second thing is, again, something we get to say for the first time on this recording, which is so fun. The first thing that's been in existence within the Artifex ecosystem for a while was the Unreal Engine piece. So we call it Artifex Unreal. It's built in Unreal Engine 5, part of the Epic Games ecosystem. But the inception of that, Justin, I want to give you credit for something. Durk shouted you out for your artwork, Shaman 2, seeing it expressed in AR. That was a significant moment for me. Another significant moment for me, Justin, in yours and Chewy Stoll's ecosystem, was Upeka. And that is an artwork placed on Super Rare. It was an artwork placed on the Super Rare platform and collected on the Super Rare platform. And essentially, it was an immersive game. And you were able to walk into this immersive landscape and experience a lot of beautiful things. And some of those beautiful things were animated, and other pieces were static. I just found it so fascinating. That caused our initial dialogues. And then we went down the road of taking these 3D models and showing essentially the highest fidelity use case, which was to put them in that type of an immersive environment and build a lot of magical things around it. So Justin, I want to go to you first on this one to talk maybe a step back about Upeka and your start there and building in Unreal, and then walking that forward into the Artifex ecosystem.
Yeah. Yeah. Alpaca is an immersive game. It's sort of a meditative type experience. You explore this kind of mythical world with 9 different floating islands that each have their own like design elements and like uniqueness to them. So that's something that I created in collaboration with Chewy Stoll. And that was, as you said, released on Super Rare. That one was started in Unreal Engine 4, and I really wish that Unreal Engine 5 had been out at the time, because I mean it's pretty common knowledge now with their systems like Nanite, which allows for super high resolution 3D models to be used in an immersive game in a much less performance taxing way, and Lumen, which allows for real-time global illumination, which essentially, if you're not a technical person, means that when light comes from a light emitting object and hits a surface, before global illumination, this technology, you would only have the first hit of light to object, and so you'd have like harsh shadows. That's like what causes that kind of 90s 3D aesthetic. Global illumination calculates the subsequent bounces of that same ray of light, and so you get like the kind of subtle ways that light bouncing off of a surface might reflect onto another surface. And it's difficult to put into words, but you very much know it when you see it, because it feels much more real. So that's Lumen. which was not out at the time when we made Upeka, unfortunately. But um, with Artifex Unreal, we've been able to do all of it in Unreal Engine 5 and take advantage of those features. So it's been really cool to be able to have the ability to create in a much more streamlined way these like experiences with such high visual fidelity, extremely realistic, highly detailed objects and materials lit by very naturalistic, um, believable lighting. Uh, yeah, that's just one of the biggest things that I think differences between Upeka and what we've been able to accomplish with Artifacts Unreal is that the technology just kind of wasn't there at the time, but it is now. And I think I would like to, should I ever have the time, go back and like remaster it for Unreal Engine 5 and just see if I can get uh, some of that real time, you know, realistic lighting. Because the whole thing is like an outdoor environment. So obviously with that kind of like dynamic lighting, like the time of day changes, I just think that'd be really cool. But should I ever have the time? I have no idea.
Durk, how about you on the Unreal front?
Just kind of like what we've done with it, or why I fell in love with it.
Yeah, or just that general philosophy of trying to push for a use case that maybe people haven't seen before, and giving it to them.
Right,
I would even go
right.
to the distribution, something to call out the distribution even. Making the decision there, we weren't content with making it a downloadable. At the time, we were seeing a lot of security issues with downloadable files, and we were a bit concerned about putting people in a position where they had to click a link or go to
Right.
those extremes. So instead, and to this day we do pixel stream it to a browser window, which has allowed a lot more people to interact with it and get the ultimate end experience. So yeah, just that general philosophy as it relates to Unreal of pushing boundaries.
Yeah, I think it's really important that when you're building like in a space where developments happen really fast, it's really hard to not have any technical debt. As Justin just mentioned, the nanite and the lumen, all of a sudden your old projects look super outdated. It's going to continue to happen. So what are you building for? There's our AR side, the GLB side, that's doing really well and is going to be around for a while. But there's also, like as you said, a higher visual fidelity. Let's call it the AAA game quality visual. And you want to have content for that. You want to build for that because that future is coming. And yeah, as you said, to like pixel streaming, we found a kind of an easy way without any downloadable for people to visit it. But we have all those assets in place, so I think there's a lot that can be done with it, and we're getting very well adapted to like creating, I think, cool spaces really quickly with working with artists. So it's really as everything you discover, it's this whole skill set in its own. It's not like gaming. It's not like a lot of things. It's digital art, but kind of on another level.
I'll give each of you guys a curveball before we get to the other piece of this. And name one, right? Not to the exclusion of anybody, but just the first thing that pops into your brain. What's a fun anecdote of an artist? Because we've all had the pleasure of collaborating with a lot of really, really special artists over the lifespan of Artifex. And you can think of this in relation to the 3D model itself. You can think of this in relation to the immersive environment, both the ones we've done for Artifex in collaboration with Time, a lot of other cool stuff. One example that pops into your brain of you exploring something that was maybe novel, new, exciting, just one anecdote. Justin, I'm going to put you on the spot first.
Yeah, I think the Brian Brinkman space comes to mind immediately when we talk about that. Shout out Brian Brinkman, because there's a lot of physics stuff and particle elements that we had not had the opportunity to explore up until that point. And when you get to do this world where you slide down this amusement park-esque slide and then into this World's Fair type environment where when you get to the middle point, these like this ball pit type cascade of um you know that comes down from the ceiling in response to like what you do. um that was a really kind of novel thing at the time and really expanded, I think, what we thought of as possible in terms of interactions, because obviously pixel streaming definitely comes with its upsides, including no one has to download anything, and you get to have the incredible quality of Unreal Engine 5 pixel streamed. But since it is running on a remote machine, a remote server, there is some slight latency. So um, getting to the point where we felt comfortable with that performance trade-off, being able to have this fully interactive, um, several of those elements, like you go through uh, the like punching bag section where the punching bags hang from the ceiling. You bump into them and they swing back and forth, and there's like 20 of them. So like being able to integrate those features like physics and like particles, but also to just get a whole new understanding of just how much you can push the performance budget was really informative from that experience.
Shout out Brian Brinkman. Durk, how about you?
For me, it was my memory is not that great, but I think it was a Twitter space for the timepieces that we did. And I think we were talking about the Justin made this beautiful world for Storm.
Yep.
Right? Beautiful world. People should check that out. And I think we were talking about some hidden stuff or some Easter eggs. And then Justin told me, like live in the Twitter space, that there was like also an Easter egg specifically for me in there. And normally I do kind of go look at details, but I didn't for this. I think I was just a little too busy. I just kind of checked it out. So I mean, that was, and after that, I also posted this meme, like the meme where the brains explode, like the projects, normal projects with Easter eggs, projects with Easter eggs that even the developers don't know about. And then the lady from Times replied to that, "This is literal for me right now. This is exactly like how I feel." So I thought that was just a funny story, but I'm not going to spoil it. If people want to know what the Easter egg is, they need to check out the scene and sniff around.
It's so fun that you bring that up, that concept of Easter eggs and that concept of just joy in general. I'm really happy that for the most part, and things get busy from time to time and things get crunched from time to time, but for the most part, been able to keep up that joy in creation. And I think sometimes at different moments in the space, you see that go away, and you see that sort of flex in and out. Sometimes that's dependent upon time and place and market conditions and just circumstance. And that's totally understandable. But that brings a smile to my face, just thinking back at some of those Easter egg / joy-filled moments of being able to include something that surprises and delights somebody else. And you can think of that. And I love the one that you just called out, Durk. That's even one of the builders and artists surprising and delighting another one. I think that's fantastic. I think we can go to the Dave Krugman world. Shout out Dave Krugman. That one comes to mind from an Easter egg delivery from the build side to the collaborating artist. I think that was one of the most Easter egg rich environments that's been done before. And then it goes also down to even the artist. I'll give my story, even though I wasn't asked. So, but selfishly, I always bring up the Philip Otis 3D model. And actually, I'm going to bring up two, Philip Otis and Jonathan Wolf. But Jonathan Wolf put an RD on the back of his skate ramp, and Philip Otis put relentless on the back of the cat head. And that to me is a word that's been very special and meaningful in my own life. So for him to think about my own history and how that tied in, that was just like one of those, I have to take a step back and just be quiet and think about how special this is for a few minutes, and then sort of return to my computer screen and keep plowing. So I love the joy.
That was great. Yeah, Jonathan Wolf. Actually, I think the whole team had their initials on that skate ramp,
Yeah.
which kind of speaks volumes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, everyone get in there. Listen, it's artifex.art/unreal. All the worlds are up there, pixel streamed, built in Unreal 5, all free. Get in there, explore, and see what you find. All right. I feel like this, I mean, this is the first time we're saying it publicly, and some people have known that something very special has been in beta for some time. And Justin, I feel like you're the right person to announce this. So why don't you let everyone know what's up?
Yes, well, Artifex has just released the Artifex Viewer app for iPhone, which allows you to experience all of the amazing sculptures from all of our artists directly on your iPhone in 3D and augmented reality.
Woo! A
That's
little applause for Justin right now.
Thank you. Thank you.
if this was a live X Spaces, Paper Buddha would absolutely be coming over the loudspeaker with the clapping noise. He's always
Shout out
got
Paper
that dialed
Buddha.
up. Yeah, let's go.
For
Let's
sure.
go. Yeah, this is a really fun moment. This is something that I feel like in its earliest stages was sort of unplanned. You know, it wasn't something that was on the quote unquote roadmap. I think what was on the quote unquote roadmap was continuing to push, continuing to grow, to explore, to hand people the best use cases for these 3Ds that, again, we feel like there's a lot more potential for. And then it just so happened that Justin, a ton of the credit goes to you, that the idea came around to really push into the Apple ecosystem specifically. That got honed into iOS app specifically, and here we are. So it was one of those things that, from a behind the scenes perspective, little BTS shot for everyone. It was this, like, it began as this pie in the sky concept that was like, well, when we get some time, or when the dots connect, this will be a road that we go down. But I think quite quickly after it was brought up to that degree, it became something that's like, well, we're gonna have to force some time. Like we're gonna have to force some time in here, box it out. It just feels too special and something that we want to give people. And the fact that that's now come to fruition and now anyone can get on the Apple Store, pretty cool.
Agreed. It's the dream come true.
Let's go.
Yeah, really cool, man. I have to admit, you guys know this. I was a bit skeptical at first. I remember Roger saying that, Justin's building an app. Like, we are a software company now. Like, I just went through some stuff with Aku. I was like a little wary of like this route, but yeah, like 180. I mean, it's such a great, Roger, you call it like conversation starter, kind of putting this art into your hands, kind of experience. That's kind of priceless.
Thinking about it, and a lot of this goes back to our discussions. Just like, we can speak both broadly and specifically to Artifex, but you do go out there to some of these platforms or marketplaces, and a lot of the NFTs, it's not immediately clear what they are. And especially when it comes to 3D GLBs, because some sites don't even have a 3D viewer, which means that you would be hard pressed to have some, I mean, you wouldn't expect anybody to understand without an actual 3D viewer what that object is. Yeah. And then even the ones that do have 3D viewers, it's often a click away, meaning when you arrive at the site, you are interacting or you're viewing a thumbnail first. And a thumbnail is still in nature and it's flat in nature. It could have, it could look like it's a 3D object, but there's no interactivity that's available there. You have to click through to another screen, and then you're beholden to the quality of the GLB viewer there. So just thinking about it from that perspective of, yeah, I mean, hey, we have to be the most biased ones in the room. It's like, these are pretty damn special. And the tools that exist aren't doing a good enough job telling the story. Let's go off and do something mad, like create an app for seemingly no immediate and tangible benefit. Durk, I understand your skepticism initially. Like, yeah, totally get it. It just felt important to be able to quote unquote hand somebody a sculpture and say, hey, you know that NFT that you collected? This is that, not the flat thumbnail, not the rotating MP4 video. It's actually this thing that you can scale and you can dimensionalize and you can bring into your environment. You can contextualize and storytell. I don't know. It just feels special. Anyway, I can get very rambly when pressed about this stuff.
I think I also got a bit caught up in like the utility. Like, all right, we have an app with the 3D, but what can you do with it? Can you and then like more like reality check, like when you go to a museum, and then people talked about this in this space for a long time, like the utility is that the art is there. That's really it. And that should be enough. So I really liked what Justin did, create a really clean app, and it's very clear what it's for. And it gives a nice platform to all the artists that are involved. And I think, yeah, I think that's pretty strong.
That's one of the most exciting aspects, because some of the artists are aware, not all of the artists are aware, and it's very. I think that's fun from a delivery perspective, to be able to say, this amazing thing that we collaborated on, and that we've never not been proud of. We've now gone to this length to really, again, put that in people's hands and give it a life of its own. Have it live on long after. I mean, that was always the goal here. It's like digital stone that lasts, quote unquote, forever. And whether that's a hyperbole or whether that's true or not, let's see. But let's push it as far out as we possibly can. So very, very fun. Justin, talk a little bit more. I think this is the right forum for it. And maybe talk in a design philosophy manner. You can broaden out. You can go at, but you can broaden out a little bit and give people some of your perspective, which I think is really valuable on this. The app itself and the time, effort, and energy that was put into the design elements of the app itself, how someone gets from point A to point B to point C, how someone scrolls, the feedback mechanisms within the app, that's art. That was art. How you considered it and how you talked through it and how thoughtful you were about it. That's an art piece. And so, yeah, go through that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I've been super passionate about the design of the experience and visually. The first, like my personal passion and history with design, and for iPhone specifically, goes way back to when I was in middle school. I made a theme for Cydia for jailbroken iPhones. If you're a Gen Zer, you might not know that there used to be a time when you couldn't replace all your app icons with whatever you wanted, and so people would jailbreak their phones, not just for that reason, but that was one of the big ones. And you could like make themes for the whole operating system and for change the look and feel of things in the apps. And I did that, and so that's been like a huge part of just like my fundamental interest for a long time is design. And on top of just the visual design, that it should be beautiful, the experience design, and coming at it from a design philosophy of trying to maximize the enjoyability of the user experience. Because I think that was the biggest North Star through this whole entire process was like what I really wanted was for the user experience to feel seamless, and for the user to be sort of surprised and delighted, to steal your phrase, Roger, by the different the things they could interact with, how smooth and sort of seamless it feels. And the biggest phrase that I kind of kept saying to myself was, what we're trying to do here is to dissolve the barrier between the user and their content. So, in designing things, it's easy to get kind of, making it pretty just for the sake of it being pretty, or like not putting function first. But I thought it was incredibly important that everything should take a backseat to the content and the way that the user interfaces with the content. So it should be as simple as is possible to, you got these big gigantic tiles of each artist's and their one of ones. Beautiful scrolling list with, a custom sort of physics thing that makes it feel super like fluid and responsive. But you can just find the artist super easily, super visually, immediately opens it in the 3D viewer. And uh you know, from there, if you want to learn more about them, you can just tap on the arrow next to the name or even on their name. You can get a description, link out to the artist, their page on the Artifex website. And there's, a couple of tricks like the turntable function, which rotates each sculpture. Um, so you can just kind of get a 360 of it, which is pretty cool. And the device rotation feature, which is pretty cool. I really like the Philip Hodis sculpture in that viewer because um, you just rotate your device and it like moves along with it. Just feels kind of magical when the stars align for it. And then also the augmented reality, which as we were talking about earlier, is kind of is so important in bridging the divide between the normal sort of physical world and digital content like this. So, you have the content and the ways that you access it, and the design of the whole thing should be sort of laser focused on preserving minimum friction between the user and how they actually can, you know, interface with uh, with the art of all of our incredible artists. Um, so responsiveness and uh, fluidity was super important ideas as I was working through the kind of feel that I wanted to present in um, in the experience of using the app. So uh, big part of that obviously is animations. There's the sort of physics elements like things you might not actively notice, but you would notice if they weren't there. Like it's called like rubber band scrolling. When you scroll past the edge of a view, it kind of elastically keeps stretching. So it's one of those things. Well, the alternative to that being like you scroll and it won't let you go anymore. It's kind of weird. Um, so that was one of them. Like that's what I mean by physics, is that it should feel like you're moving things. Like the user interface should respond to the way that you interact with it, which sounds like a super obvious statement, but is, if you've looked at a lot of apps, is not, you know, not as obvious as it should be apparently. Um, but yeah, uh, you know, obviously it's function over form, but also the form, the aesthetics had to be as aesthetically pleasing as possible. So, there's the sort of beautiful custom translucency effects, especially in like the description view on in the 3D viewer for each artist. So you click on their name or the arrow to the right of their name, and it brings down the description. And that view is like this beautiful translucent glass type effect. And the whole aesthetic of this, by the way, is very heavily influenced by Apple's Vision Pro headset design. Um, so that was sort of, as far as aesthetics goes, like, the biggest inspiration. But it's a lot beyond aesthetics as well, because what I've been referring to as spatial skeuomorphism, which is, not the most accessible phrase. So I'll try to break it down. I think Durk mentioned skeuomorphism earlier as well. But so spatial skeuomorphism to me, if I guess first, skeuomorphism is sort of the approach to design where you try to mimic the way that real things look in your digital designs. So, for example, the old calculator app, currently there's the sort of flat design aesthetic. previously was very skeuomorphic with like the calculator that literally looks like the exact Braun calculator. That's a real physical product. You have like the Note app, which is like literally a legal pad. It looks like, someone took a photo of a legal pad and put it in an app. So that's like the skeuomorphic approach, is sort of cribbing highly realistic designs from the real world to try to make the experience of using digital things a lot more familiar and easy. But that's very much fallen out of favor because it's seen as sort of, hacky and overdone at this point, and doesn't make a lot of logical sense. And oftentimes is pretty arbitrary. So the sort of thing that I think we should still take from the idea of skeuomorphism, though, is skeuomorphism spatially, which, taking things like physics, animation, fluidity, responsiveness, haptic feedback. So the app, like, responds to the way that you interact with it by giving you like these feedback clues in differing proportions. So the whole thing, that what I take from skeuomorphism then is not those like textures and things, but like trying to give the user these sort of oftentimes subliminal sort of features of real world physics, lighting, realism, in ways that helps the experience become more accessible immediately. So the goal being that it should feel intuitive and like sort of immediately understandable. And that should be possible because of the way it's designed to feel like, like real world objects, like easy interaction. Like when you have a view that's like the description view, for instance, an obvious example of what I'm talking about with spatial skeuomorphism is it comes in, it animates on top of the view. So you see it coming in, it doesn't come out of nowhere. And it's translucent, so you can still see, to an extent, the background content. And there's a bit of a drop shadow, so you can get a sense of the depth that's happening. So the sort of design philosophy there being that through the way that not just the visuals, but all the things that I've been talking about come together as the design should feel sort of immediately intuitive and joyful to use.
Justin, do you feel that's like an evolution you're describing, where it starts off with actually wood textures on the calculator, so it's super clear what you use it for? Then it becomes a little bit more abstract, so the shapes are more abstract, but they still have the physics. They have the weight. They have a little bit of that haptic feedback, and if you like extrapolate that, like where would that? Because it sounds like that's also just like a station until this thing, as I described earlier, like tells us what it wants to be. But I do think that there are some things that we won't, if in the future ever we get a universal pictogram of what it means to save a file, there's a very high likelihood it's going to look something like a floppy disk, because it becomes a hieroglyph and people don't even know what a floppy disk is, but it doesn't mean anymore. So it's interesting. It's a whole landscape of things that will almost like memes, that some will die out, some will morph and change into other things. Some will stay, but for other purposes. Then what I would always do when I was building VR environments, I would think about this principle quite a lot, and I would really think about like, what's the utility of this object in this new space? So a chair in VR is very useless. You can't sit on it, obviously. But it's really good to give you an immediate sense of human scale. Same as like a bike. So there are these other reasons you can still utilize these elements that from the real world. But yeah, the experience and the purpose is just different.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely an evolution of the concept where, as we were saying previously, just super realistic textures, but that kind of quickly becomes,
Jackie.
Yeah, tacky. It becomes like when you see like a logo from the 90s or something, and you're like, oh, you can immediately place the time and place when that was made because it's so stylized. Like that's the kind of it's not timeless is the thing. um and what we're sort of trying to get at with a design that's intuitive is that it should uh or a design that strives to be somewhat timeless, or as timeless as you can be, because obviously trends change no matter what, but is that there's not any sort of unnecessary ornamentation that kind of came with the skeuomorphic age. But we should still learn the positive lessons from it, which was that there is obviously a lot of value in trying to replicate some things from the real world in digital interfaces, because you know, uh, as humans, we're sort of hardwired to try to understand new paradigms. And if that takes a lot of effort or does not come across super easily, then people are less, that's a point of friction between the user and what they're trying to experience or interact with. So if you're wondering, like, why does it matter, any of the stuff that I'm talking about? Uh, the reason that it matters is because the point of it is to try to make it feel seamless and intuitive. And then these are just some of the specific kind of things I've latched onto as ideas to make that happen.
Yeah, there's a lot of design in there that you don't notice, which is like perfect. I mean, you do notice it, but it's not obvious. It's not like, oh, Justin's been playing around with this thing, like auto scales when you do this thing. No, it's really, and you've done a really good job. And I think it's, if Artifex is here to kind of elevate as artists we have on board, then we really need to have this artistic approach to creating an app like that. It cannot be a simple app. It cannot have the scroll function where it stops and it doesn't do all the fanciness you mentioned, because this way that's seamless, and it's seamless. So the real experience is the actual art. So yeah, great job.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I'm trying to say, really, is that it doesn't try to draw attention to itself. It doesn't say, oh, look, this is a good design. It just is as seamless as it can be. And sort of a lot of this actually comes from Dieter Ram's 10 Principles of Good Design, which is Dieter Rams was product designer for Braun, which is one of the most famous industrial design companies. But more, relevant to the modern world is the biggest inspiration that Steve Jobs and Johnny Ive, which, if you're unfamiliar with Steve Jobs, he founded Apple. And for them, Johnny Ive being the chief designer from Apple, and Steve Jobs, who was also intricately involved in the design of all the Apple products, they looked to this list of 10 design principles as like the biggest sort of cheat code to designs that could be as as timeless and as intuitive as possible. So I think when you see how that's worked, which is like these products that are sort of immediately understood by literally billions of people around the world, it's like that's a pretty good indicator that that's a good design philosophy to follow. So yeah, that's one of the principles of that is like good design makes a product understandable. And what that means is that it should be self-explanatory as much as possible. And like you're saying, like that's not something that should ever really be obvious with things that you use and interact with, because if it works well, you don't think about it. You only have to think about it if something is wrong most of the time, or if it was designed poorly or unintuitively. So I think the ideal outcome, kind of sadly, for this is that no one notices the design because it's completely intuitive.
Yeah, but that's the same fate as the music composer that scores a movie. People are so entrenched in the experience that it just becomes part of them. It's not you're not outside of it anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
It's also why it's important to have these kinds of dialogues, and on such a fun day. For anyone who's listening, I want to stress, literally, the news was conveyed that it was live on the App Store. It's been in beta for a minute now, but literally the news was conveyed by Justin that it's now live on the App Store immediately prior to launching this recording. I think that's fantastic. And I'm going to do the honors live here, not to distract from you guys, but I'm literally going to put it on my phone now because I've been messing around with it for a few weeks now and in beta, and just very, very excited to get busy.
Can I ask you, Justin, was this the first time you submitted it, or?
Yeah, that's the first time that it was submitted to the actual App Store for distribution. We'd been using TestFlight, which for anyone listening who doesn't know, that's the service that Apple uses. When you're developing an app, you can have it distributed to other people who aren't part of your developer account. So like regular users for testing before launch on TestFlight. So yeah, we'd used TestFlight for, I think, 5 different builds with incremental improvements, but this is the first time that we launched on the App Store. And funnily enough, like, you hear all the time about how Apple is usually very like capricious about, you know,
sizes and all the extra stuff you need to upload. Only that's been my experiences. We've done some apps in the past, and like all the specifics and stuff like that, it bounced like a couple of times. So I was like, I think all the stuff, the design stuff you talked about, they saw that. They were like, yeah,
yeah,
this
hopefully,
makes total sense. Yeah.
Maybe that's a vote of conference from the world's most valuable company, you know?
Yep.
Hopefully.
Well, guys, I'm in. It's official. It has been downloaded. Yeah. I'm in. So this is always enjoyable to do this with the two of you. We get to do it. Again, we're lucky you get to do it often, but not often in public. And I always want to do as good a job as I possibly can to reflect back on who you two are as individuals, your artwork, of which, you know, both of you have some incredible artwork as well in the space. I would highlight NFT Origin Stories, which was an interview show, 67 interviews of artists. Each of you have your own interview on Origin Stories. So there's some extended content if you want to hear more from Durk or Justin Wetch there. But I want to leave you guys asking you 2 questions. I'll lob one and we'll go Durk to Justin, and I'll lob the other and we'll go in reverse order. So tough question to answer, I'm sure, but that's what this is all about. Name one thing that you expect in the future of art. You can go as macro or micro as you want, but Durk, what comes to mind first? What's one thing you expect to happen within the future of art?
I have this, it's not a very specific idea, but that idea of the accessibility of tools to make art, and where playing games and gaming and art creation are going to mesh into this beautiful thing where you're building and you're playing on all these levels. I mean, kids are already doing it now, 8 years old, in Roblox and stuff like that, but there were going to be, I think that's huge, because I've personally experienced just like the benefits of art for mental health. And I feel if there was any pill we could give all of humankind, is that everybody does become an artist, or at least does it because they enjoy it, whatever form it takes, but that all barriers and stuff like that are taken away. That's a lofty idea, because of course the biggest reason people don't do it is because they hold themselves back. So maybe something else needs to happen prior. But yeah, I see some signs, especially in the digital art, the stuff I just talked about, that people are putting in so much time building beautiful stuff just because there's a community, and not because they're getting paid, but they get a lot of fulfillment and they really feel part of something. I think that's going to be, yeah, it is already a huge, actually, just a lot of people don't know about it, but I hope it's going to be a positive force.
Well said. Justin, what's one thing you expect in the future of art?
The first thing that comes to mind when you ask me that question is, I think it's kind of already starting to happen, but I think the major force of it has not happened yet, which is sort of a reckoning with the sort of divorce of the ideas of the value of an art piece versus like the effort expended to create it. Like, you see that happening a lot with AI art or art that uses AI in its creation. People reckoning with the idea of, if a artist used AI in their process, does that devalue, the value of that art piece? So with tools coming around to sort of, as Dirk was saying, democratize the process of our creation, um, and it becomes easier for anyone to create anything that they can imagine, whether it's by, for a complete non-visual artist, typing something into mid journey or whatever, or um, for an artist looking for compositional ideas or whatever. It's gonna come to a point where there used to be like an enormous barrier between, it required an extraordinary amount of skill, for instance in 3D, up until a few years ago, to create uh, a scene of any moderate or high complexity. And that's no longer the case. The tools have gotten easier to use. They're more procedural. It does more of the repetitive tasks for you, sort of into the democratization of process that Dirk was talking about. But as that continues to accelerate, um, you know, and more artists are coming up who natively use that kind of process in their creation, uh, it is going to come to a point where there's going to be sort of a mass discussion that needs to be had about, you know, there's going to be a lot of art, like all art is going to have acceleration in some way uh, from the developments that are happening, whether it's AI, whether it's proceduralism, or just any other kind of tool that can help a person take an idea and implement it. And the sort of core thing that interests me in your question about what we can expect from the future of art is that kind of sociological. Well, now that you no longer have to, for a great artist like, Michelangelo taking 20 years to do this massive ornate painting on the ceiling of a chapel. And then, you know, nowadays something of the same complexity uh, can be vastly, accelerated by the fact that we have access to you know, much more, a lot of tools and things that can help accelerate the process. Uh, it just becomes an interesting question of, now, like, it's going to sort of force the issue, I guess, is what I'm saying, of like, it used to be that the fact that those kind of things required that amount of time just to exist meant that people could point to that fact as the reason that the art had value. And the fact that that no longer is going to be, it's not going to be completely gone, but it's going to be massively minimized as a factor, is going to sort of force the issue and force people to really think about like where the value comes from, uh, in terms of, you know, the divorce of the value of art from the effort expended to create it.
Very interesting. I like that conceptual discussion.
Yeah, well, that's what you get when you ask me an open-ended question.
Justin, let's stay on you, and then I'll pass it back to Dirk. Who should be on the future of art from a guest standpoint? Who's the first person that comes to mind?
Hmm. Um, that's a very difficult question.
Dirk, you can jump into if you have.
Yeah, it's a hard question. I should have
I stumped you both.
I should have thought about this. I want to say a good one. I mean, I know a lot of cool, but I'm just the cool thing about the podcast is it's not just about artists. It can be anyone from the space, and I think that's what I really. It's also artists, but that's what I really enjoy about it so much. So I just don't want to say something
Oh, you know what? I
obvious,
have my
but
suggestion. Adewale Mayowa.
All right. Okay.
Really brilliant, surrealist sort of insanely talented artist. I think he'd have a lot to say with very like poetic way of thinking about things and very articulate and expressive with words and not just visuals. And again, like very poetic way of thinking about things and talking about them. So I think I'd like to see Adewale on the Future of Art podcast.
Let's go. Great suggestion.
All right, I'm thinking two names, but
Say them both. Throw them both out there.
I'd love to see Pablo Fraile.
Yep.
Just been in the space for a long time, and we have a little bit of history. But yeah, it was interesting to kind of hear his story, because it was early already in the news with some stuff he did in the NFT space. So I bet he's got some stories. And the other one would be Tuxan. I'm not even sure if that's what his real name is, but he's basically set up the crypto avatars, and he's kind of the guy to talk to when you're talking about VRMs, you're talking about avatars in the metaverse. Has some interesting stuff to say. I think also looks like they're tapping into the Asian market, which is really interesting. So from a business side, also interesting person, I think.
Collectively, between the two of you, those are three really amazing, diverse suggestions from all walks of the space, from the artist side, from the collector side, from the wide-ranging builder / metaverse side. So really, really good stuff. I couldn't have asked for a better 3 suggestions.
Well, wait, if he gets 2, let me pop my second one. I'm gonna go with Connor Grasso, also from here. Great artist, works at Shriller, which is Fungible's company, I believe. Very interesting art style, was a pioneer of photography on the blockchain, very early days. And I think was the original inspiration for me to look into blockchain at all, because I've been following his work since, obviously very talented and from the same place, Alaska. And his sort of convergence of psychedelics with introspection and like surrealist photography and 3D, sort of expression in art. I think he could have a very interesting conversation on this platform about the future of art.
Fantastic. All right, we got 4
I got
now.
a rep for my fellow Alaskans, man. You know what?
For real, yeah. Big love to Alaska. Although you did just send me a photo, apparently somewhere in Alaska, someone loves New Jersey.
Oh yeah, I was at this old abandoned bridge out in Palmer, which is about 40 miles from Anchorage, which is the only city that people know in Alaska. And there was this graffiti on the bridge that said New Jersey with a heart on it. And I was like, why? But Roger's big on New Jersey, so I had to shout him out. Although I am really pissed at that bridge because the wind was so bad, it stole my hat, and I had to use my backup hat, which is an identical hat that I have in cases where something like this happened.
Do you have a backup to the backup? Or are you done?
I do now.
Okay.
The backup has been replaced. The line of succession has been extended.
Nice. All right, gentlemen. Listen, this is a pleasure. I don't imagine it's the last time we're going to be doing it. We'll carry this over to many X spaces and future shows, and I will see about those suggestions that you made. Listen, you both inspire me, period, end of story. You inspire distinct aspects of how I approach the space, how I think about 3D, how I think about, quite frankly, the future of art, which is also why we're doing this show, this podcast. So can't thank you both enough. Again, it's an honor and privilege to be able to work with you guys on a daily basis and call you both friends. So onward, upward, and thanks for joining.
Well, thank you. And just on the way out, I got to say, search Artifex Viewer on the App Store and download the app. And thanks for having us, Roger. It was a pleasure. And we'll be on space next.
Thank you for listening and for being part of the future of art. If you liked the episode, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite platform, and onward to the many conversations that await us. The Future of Art is produced by Artifex. Artifex, ARTIFEX, was created to honor today's top digital fine artists in 3 dimensions. Each artist's one-of-one work of art becomes a collectible 3D sculpture and centerpiece of an immersive world built in Unreal Engine, the creation tool of epic games. Search Artifex Viewer on Apple and download our brand new free app to experience the sculptures in augmented reality. And visit artifex.art/unreal to literally step inside the art on your browser.